Drawing eyes is one of the most difficult things to do. Today I'm going to be talking about how to study, what approach to study drawing eyes so that you can start to at least understand how to approach them better. Hi, my name is Luis Escobar. I'm an artist on the Simpsons television show. I've done storyboards, character layout, and animation for them for over 20 years. And I'm here to empower you. So one of the things that I have a Patreon account, and one of my patrons asked me a question about drawing eyes and his frustration about drawing eyes. So I'm going to try as best as I can to answer his questions, and they're really, really difficult questions to answer and very specific. As well as he showed me what he did, how he's trying to study the eyes, and his frustration about not understanding what he's doing wrong. Because really, it happens, especially if you're self-studying, if you're doing it on your own. Sometimes it just could just go awry and you just don't know how to approach stuff. So hopefully I'm going to be able to clarify this so that if you are in the same boat, you'll be able to work it out. So William asked me this. Well, I asked him to clarify his question because he gave me his eye studies, and he was like, well, what am I doing wrong? I don't understand what's going on with these eyes that I'm trying to draw. And I said, well, I just needed to have him clarify specifically what for him was troubling. So please bear with me. This, I'm going to read what he wrote here, and it's very, very tiny. So please bear with me as I read his frustration here. So when I asked him what he was having trouble with, and I also found this to be very universal, he said not having eyelids too deep. Okay, so not having eyelids too deep, pronounced so that they don't bulge out like a sore thumb. So yeah, eyelids bulge, but it's very subtle. On the face without nothing anchoring them from falling into the sockets, while however in photos the lids do bulge slightly. I've attempted to construct and reconstruct attempts doing this, only deconstructing the actual photo in my head. So this is his attempt at deconstructing a head so that he could draw the eyes in them. And what he said was that his attempt in doing this, this only deconstructing the actual photo in my head, doing those instead of copies to avoid the, and he quotes John Kay about people who draw really good figure drawings but don't know how to draw from their imagination. But the eyes look bulgy. So, and I'm gonna specifically talk about that notion of being able to draw good figure drawings and not being able to draw from your imagination problem in a second, and what John Kay meant by that. Okay, so the size of the eyeball in comparison to the head, the lids, what's visible of the eyeball in the pupil. Realism and cartoon, since I have no idea how Bugs is going to have those two giant ovals from your eye formula sheet fit inside his skull. So he's essentially talking about this, where I have this gigantic eyeball trying to break down a Looney Tunes eye. And I'm going to explain that too. This giant eyeball really is, well, give me a second and I'll talk about it later. Okay, so and then number 3, eyes, balls, lids, lacrimal, caruncle coming out symmetrical instead of having the differences that separate them from the left eye and the right eye. All right, coming out symmetrical. Oh, right. Yes, of course. Yes. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about here, not having the eyelids too deep so that they don't bulge out like a sore thumb. Okay, so eyelids. Eyes have eyelids, and they do have some kind of depth in them. How do you draw them so that they're not bulgy? Well, you start by not drawing them at all. Like if you were going to draw the eyelids here, I'm going to draw a very cartoony eye. That's a tear duct. You at first don't draw them, and then you kind of imply them. You kind of thicken it here, thicken it here a little bit, and that's it. Like in a more Looney Tunes eye, you imply it by just having a thick line. A little bit right there. Let me go back and do a little bit more of a slightly more Disney eye. In the Disney eye, you do the same thing. You just kind of imply it. It's usually a little bit dark. It's really subtle. It doesn't have to be, you know, this big thing. The drawing that I did here is exaggerated so that you can see that there is some kind of overlap. The notion being that when you do a Looney Tunes type eye, it's, you know, you're trying to make sure that you're getting this kind of overlap. Just a little bit. Not, you don't have to go overboard. You don't have to overdo it. It doesn't have to be this, you know. It's very, very subtle. So it's very subtle. It's not a big deal. Okay, so that's how you would do the eyelid. It doesn't have to be that over the top. Okay, so yeah, bulging eye is not pronounced. Okay, so here's the John Kay thing about figure drawing, and when you drew this, you didn't want to do it off of a copy or the construction. You constructed it and then you didn't. So what was says the actual photo attempted doing this, only deconstructing the actual photo in my head, doing those instead of copies to avoid the not being able to draw from your head thing. Okay, so the deconstruction, the problem that I'm seeing with the deconstruction is that you really didn't deconstruct it. When doing a deconstruction of a head, you really need to know how to deconstruct a head properly. Otherwise, and you end up in that exact situation where you can draw an image from a photo, but you can't draw from your head. And that comes from deconstructing things only from your head without having studied how to deconstruct a photo or having how to deconstruct an actual head. So I would highly recommend Bridgman's book. Because you were using Loomis, I would recommend Bridgman's book. It's a little bit more in-depth. And this is why I'm always recommending Bridgman. Because if you look at Bridgman's deconstruction, especially something like this, and something like this, you can actually see all the planes of the head and how they work. Okay, so, and he goes even in more depth in here. So you get the side planes. You can see how where the eyes would fit within this construction, and how if you even just get the right planes of the face and the eye's not even there, just a shadow shape, you could still imply the eye. And look at this, these shapes, they're all there. Let's see how this here, see this head shape and how it's constructed. See that? Okay, so now take a look at that. Now take a look at what you did here below. Where is any of this in your drawing? Where are all these planes? Because we've talked about this stuff before. There's a reason why I kept asking you to draw boxes. Because if you can't draw boxes, you can't draw a head, because the head is made out of all these complex boxy shapes. And see, look at this. How it's all it's within a box, and there's all kinds of boxy shapes here. Do you see? So what we're talking about is when John Kay says that somebody has beautiful figure drawings but can't draw from his imagination, it's because he hasn't memorized the head construction. You have to not only, you have to copy and learn from this and then be able to do this from your imagination. But the first thing you have to do if you're going to do that, if you're going to construct something, is get in here and figure out, using the Bridgman, where all this stuff fits. So I'm going to use, see, so like, so I have the book out, and I'm looking at the construction, and ideally what I want to eventually get to is that I don't have to have the book out anymore. But at first, if you don't have the book out, how are you supposed to know what you're doing? So what you're doing here is learning to see how this works. So this is far more advanced than a cartoon, right? There's more to the head than a cartoon character. So if you're going to be studying something that's real, you got to understand what's going on. And so you got to understand that there's these rhythms here too. So this is the head construction that you probably should have had when doing this person, Bob King. Okay? That's based off of this kind of head formula. So this compared to this is much clearer. You could see how it's all put together. This is really nebulous. It doesn't tell me anything. Okay, so just on that alone, head construction is something you ought to study, and the way you study it, and if you're having trouble studying something as complicated as this, is because you haven't gotten down boxy shapes yet. So, because look how boxy these head planes are. So we're talking about drawing boxes, complex boxy shapes. And so drawing complex boxy shapes allows you to be able to then create these really complex boxy heads and different perspectives on, and because they're boxy, it's easier to wrap your head around what they're doing in perspective. So that's just studying the head, and I think I've done a video studying the head and the head construction, so I will, and how to study Bridgman. I think that's what it was. I made a video on how to study Bridgman, using Bridgman. So I'll link to that in the description of this video. But that's what I would recommend. Okay, so second, and so that hopefully answers the question as to why, even though you constructed it, it doesn't look right. Well, because you didn't really construct it. You made a facsimile having constructed it. So what you did was you took the photo and then you made a circle and you made a shape down here and then you started putting eyeballs on it. That's not construction. Not on a real face. Maybe on a cartoon you can get away with something like a circle and then a shape here, because that's kind of Freddie Moore. It's just a ball in a gushy shape. But when you're drawing realistic, when you're drawing something solid and real, this is what you have to do. Which is the reason why in my website I'm drawing cartoons. I am not drawing realistic stuff yet. Because if you can't even get to the point where you can do a Freddie Moore head, then being able to do something as complicated as a Bridgman head is going to be extremely difficult. So that's why I was taking it stair step, taking it slow, trying to get you to be able to do a simple head and get you to have the reward of having done the simple head before we go into something as complicated as a real head with real eyeballs. Okay, so as far as eyeballs, real eyeballs are concerned, I'm going to go back a little bit to the tips about eyes. And these are tips. This is not how to construct it, but things to keep in mind. That the eyelids wrap around the sphere, that from the top, that the eyelids come out, that there's thickness to the eyelids, that the eyes, the eyelid origins are symmetrical, and that's where the eye comes in, and that the lids wrap around the eye. All of those things are very important, which you can see that it follows all these rules of thumb, basically, when you do a cartoony eye. Thickness of the eye, the origin points of the lids, etc., etc. Okay, so now, to answer your question, it's the eyeball and the eyelid being symmetrical and all this other stuff. All right, so Bridgman again. We're going to take a look at Bridgman's eyes. So we can see with Bridgman's eyes that there is a rhythm that connects the eyes. So, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this all weird. This way. And they go around and wrap around. So we've got this line that connects. That's the eye line. See how it crosses through the origin points of the eyelids, but then these wrap around and connect. These wrap around and connect, and they are within this brow shape that has a mass of its own, and it's a boxy mass, and they wrap inside. They're inside. This muscle right here is something that a lot of people miss. And then there's this gap in between here, and that is, this right here is the eye socket, and that's where it's in. And then the eye has a muscle here, and it's in here. Again, see, there's a connection right here. Connection right there. You can see the lines there. And so it's all one unit. It all connects. Okay, so, and then now we've got these eyes right here, and you can see that you've got, here's the tear duct, it goes up, and there's, it's one giant, see how this, that the eye has a corner here, that he actually drew the corner here, and you got the muscle. And then here, he drew a line across, so that's, so you can see that that's where, that line that I was talking about, where the pivot points, and then looking up that way, and the lid wraps around this point because it bulges. So you can see right there. So you can see that he's talking about the bulge down here, right here. And, so these eyes are really, really handy to be able to study and look at. So when it comes to drawing eyes, and you're wondering what these eyes aren't doing, so let's take this and take a good look at his eyes. So let's assume that we've got the eye line. So there's an eye in here somewhere. really big, but what we're looking at here, if we were to break this down into a boxy shape, is this. We've got this, 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 and this. So there's a corner right here that we could soften, and there's a corner right here that we can soften, and the ball goes in here, but we're trying to think of this first as if it had corners. So oftentimes I like to do this. I do a diamond shape like this. And in the diamond shape, and this is, I think, in Bridgman somewhere. I don't know where, I can't find it at the moment, but it's in here somewhere. But it's like this. This side up here is longer. We've got these two. This side's longer, this side's longer, this one's shorter, and then here are the corners. So that when you soften those shapes, it looks like that. Softening those shapes. Basically got the Bridgman brow here. So that's what's happening here. You can say that if I was to really simplify, it would be boom, oops, boom, that way. That's this over here. Then this. It would probably be like that. So corner, corner. Going back to that, we're taking a look at corners here. This is turning here. This is very wide. And then this is happening here like this. This lid is kind of playing off of those corners. And then we have this muscle doing that. Then there's an invisible plane here that you don't actually see, but it's there. And that's how you avoid doing the John Kricfalusi drawing a pretty picture but not understanding, is being able to break down the eye into boxy shapes like that, so that when you do draw it from your imagination, like I did here, it looks like an actual eye, because you understand what's going on. You understand that there's muscles here, and then there's the tear duct here, and then there's this going on here, and then this eyelid here, this thickness here, tear duct here, and you can start exaggerating the hell out of it. Why? Because you know how to draw the eye, because you deconstructed it. You didn't skip any steps. You put in the work and you did all this construction understanding. Do you see? And that's how it works. You put in the work. You go in, you look at Bridgman, you just break it down into tiny little pieces, and then you just understand it so that when you exaggerate it, it still works. And as far as not knowing why this other eye over here on this side, which granted it is stinking hard, I know, because I drew pages and pages and pages and pages of just this, and I think I'm in my Patreon. You'll find the pages. I gave it to anybody who it's sketchbook pages, so I'll find the link to that particular page. I'll put it here in the video, but nobody who doesn't have access to those to my Patreon will be able to download that stuff. If you want to be able to download those sketchbook pages of me just doing eye drills, just to see what it looks like and how tedious I had to sit down and just work at it, become a patron. Become a bronze level patron. You'll have access to JPEGs, and the sketchbook pages are JPEGs. So this is different. This is different than this. This is actually, I think that the 3/4 eye looking at us with the tear duct here is way easier than this one over here. So what happens with this, and you could actually see it here, is that after you put in the nose, the tear duct is over here, and what ends up happening is that this formula sort of kind of falls apart when you're doing it from this angle. It doesn't work. Yeah, I can't. It doesn't work because look, it just goes around. So because what's going on is that the eye is the lid over here we don't have this fancy little tear duct, and this is what really kind of screws it up for me, is that the eye does this and it wraps, and the tear duct, and the tear wraps to the tear duct here. And then the origin of this eye also does this. In. So in a lot of ways you have to understand the eye as a ball even more, because this part right here is what is really kind of tricky. Sometimes you actually see this meeting of the two eyelids, and sometimes it wraps behind the eye, and you don't see when it happens. You just see eyelids kind of come out like that. So when you look at this eyeball, that's what it's doing. So we got this, and then we've got this, and it's really, really thick, all of this stuff. So it's going that way, and there's the corner. If we were to make a box, it's like this. So this is, it's just coming around, wrapping around that way. And you can see right here, look how thick this eyelid is. It's like you could totally see underneath the eyelid. And it's just this giant, thick shadow shape. Then the tear duct. And then we've got this happening. And then here's another trick. The rhythm of this eye, just like this rhythm, like either here or here, comes out like that. And then the rhythm of this eye comes out like that. It makes this. So it's like boom, and boom. So that's what's happening here. And then there's this muscle. Again, very Bridgman. So we're talking about this muscle here. Let me see if I can get it on camera. Talking about this muscle right here. This bulging chunk of muscle right here. Right there. It's a muscle mass. So in order to understand this eye, essentially in the cartoon eye, it's just a ball, and it's pointy like this. That's all it is on this side. So what makes it different than this one? Well, usually this one has this going on. There's usually a thicker, and usually there's a tear duct here, but not always. Mostly in anime eyes, but there really, in a like Freddie Moore eye, there really isn't a difference, and that's a good thing. It simplifies it. Unless you're actually going to go out of your way to do the tear duct, it's probably not worth. In a cartoon eye, you essentially are drawing two of the same eyes. This one might be thinner, and this one might be wider, but in essence, you're basically drawing the same eye. Same with the long type of Bugs Bunny type eye. You're essentially drawing the same eye. It's only when you're drawing realistic that you have to include the tear duct, and you have to put in the eyelids wrapping around, and that makes the difference. But notice that the foundation of both of these eyes is essentially the same. You're still drawing a ball with lids wrapping around it. It's just that the difference is where the tear duct is. And if you're going to see this connection, what it looks like. Okay. As far as Looney Tunes type like this, where there's this giant eye, this is the Freddie Moore eye that I was, and the type of head that I was using when I was doing this example that I was thinking about was the round head with the muzzle, and then you have like the big eye is in there. Right, and then there's probably like a giant eyeball in here. So I was kind of using this type of Freddie Moore type head in my example. So how do you... But what if you have more of a Bugs Bunny type of head? Is his eyeball that big? No. Obviously not. So if you're going to draw a Bugs, you first draw the eyelid, the eye shape that's going to be visible. But then you're thinking about that the eye is in here somewhere like that. And it's probably not that... It has to fit in the head, but it's probably in here. And it looks probably more like an egg than an eyeball. But the point is that you're trying to assume that this part of the eye is still a ball. That's the point. So the eyelids and the eyeball, and then inside, if there's an eyeball, the eyeball has depth. And I don't have a Bugs Bunny model sheet in front of me or anything, so please excuse me if this doesn't look very Bugs Bunny-ish. You know, he's sort of something like this. But again, this is what we're doing here, and again, look, I'm just drawing him more boxy here so I could wrap my head around all his forms. and the eye it's flexible. The point that I was trying to make when I drew that giant eyeball is not that that is the absolute dogmatic size of the eyeball inside the head. What I was trying to convey was that whatever shape is visible on the outside of these eyelids is spherical with dimension. And they aren't just stickers. So we've got there's an eyeball in here, and there's an eyeball in here that we can't see somehow. But the point is that these are spherical. They're three-dimensional spheres that are wrap around in here. Okay, so at least that's the way you're supposed to think about them. And at first you do kind of want to at least acknowledge that, and then eventually there's a lot of artists who just draw the eyes. They don't think about it. They just do it because they know what they're doing. They know that that's what's happening. But at first you got to make sure that you know that that's what's happening. Okay, so that's kind of the eye tutorial here that I'm trying to convey, and why I wrote the article and the lesson at the drawing website, which I will link to in the description of this video. But as far as your studies go, they're lacking understanding. First of all, your eyeballs aren't very circular, so it helps if your eyes are circular. Second, the eyelids don't take up the entire eyeball. They only take a small portion. They don't take the entire eyeball like this. They don't take over the eye. That's not what they do. That's not what they do. The eyeball is the eyeball is huge, and the eyelids only expose a little bit of the eye. And then the eyelids go over the rest of the eye, which is why they bulge like this. The eye is really big, and so they're shaping this and this right here. And here again, they're shaping this and this right here. So the eyeball is way over here. So it makes that shape. So that's what we're doing here. Do you see? So, and again, this here is probably this is a good size. It's about right. But if you don't understand what is happening, then this isn't gonna help. And what you got to do is practice drawing the Bridgman eye and then trying to construct, trying to just take real eyeballs and see how what his construction looks like on an actual photograph, and then try to synthesize it so that when you draw your own eyes from your imagination, you understand what's going on. And that's the difference between just copying what you see and understanding what you see. But there's a ton of extra study that you got to put into this. It isn't just I drew a circle in a shape and then I'm done. I don't understand what's going on. There's so much to this. There's way more to a single eye than it's a pain in the neck. It's a huge pain. That's one of the reasons why so many people have problems drawing, is because they assume that it should be easy. They assume that it's just like, oh, that's it. I'm just going to draw a circle, and then, oh, why is my circle not working? Well, there's more to it. So that's why I tend to recommend Bridgman above everybody else, because I think that his stuff is more visibly solid and blockier and understandable than a lot of other books, which seem to just skip over the stuff like, oh, just draw a circle and then just an oval and then you're done. And it's like, no, there's a lot to it. There's more to it than that. Like, I mean, look at the way he breaks down a nose. I mean, how are you, if you don't do this, your noses are gonna look really flat and they're not gonna have dimension. So, and it's the same with eyes. There's a lot of muscles going on. There's a lot of corners being in there. Like, if you have to make them boxier, wrap your head around how they are working in 3 dimensions. So I hope that this video has helped you just get into the idea of how to approach drawing an eyeball, as opposed to just assuming that it should be easy and that construction is a circle and some shape and that's it. Especially in something realistic. In cartoons, you can get away with much more, which is, again, the reason why I write the lessons that I wrote in the order that I'm writing them at the drawing website, is because I want you to get used to drawing simple shapes, simple ideas, before we get into this realistic stuff, which is really highly complicated. It's extremely complicated. Let's start simple. Bubble eyes, dot eyes, and then explaining the idea that real eyes, when you translate them into Looney Tunes, more Freddie Moore eyes, that at least just make sure that you know that it's a ball in there, and that your eyelids are a little bit more have some sort of depth. It doesn't have to over bulge, but some sort of depth. And so before you start jumping ahead and starting to do these extremely complicated stuff without even knowing how to draw a box, without being able to know how to create a boxy shape and then round it off, how to make a flat shape into a boxy shape so it's more solid, and there's like a lot of other steps that you have to know before you approach doing these sort of things. And skipping steps will always lead to frustration. And not having a solid foundation in the fundamentals, not being able to turn a box, not being able to make a boxy shape into a softer shape, not being able to understand the dimensions of a soft shape by making it more boxy, it's gonna kill you. It's going to ruin your work because you haven't wrapped your head around the fundamentals, which is usually boxes. Learn to draw boxes. Everything in Bridgman is a box. Drawing soft shapes is really difficult. It's easier to box it and understand it by putting it in a box or softening a box than going straight to soft shapes. It's easier to draw to understand the direction of a ball if it's inside a box because now you know its direction. Do you see? And that goes for not necessarily circles, but an egg shape. So it's easier to understand these shapes within boxy forms, which is why Bridgman breaks everything down into boxy shapes, so that you could wrap your head around direction and because the human body is so round and soft that you have to like figure out how things are, where the corners in the face are, because then you can soften that up later. Okay. I hope that answers your question, and if this is the kind of thing that you find useful, then please support me on Patreon. I will start creating a more in-depth tutorial in Patreon about a lot of different things, and so far there's already been some exclusive videos that I just put up specifically for patrons, as well as I do coaching. As of the time of this recording, my coaching is full, but I'm going to implement a new tier for anybody who would like to have received coaching but can't. Like I said, these more in-depth tutorials will be there for those people who can't have coaching directly from me. But those slots tend to fluctuate. Sometimes people leave for whatever reason, and so they will be open, and I will announce it to my patrons first when the coaching slots are open, and then to everybody else. So again, please support me on Patreon if you like this type of tutorial, and if you want to go more and more in depth, then I will put even more tutorials for in a special tier that I have yet to create at the time of this video, but hopefully if you're watching this in the future, that tier exists, and there will be more in-depth tutorials about even deeper things, and it'll be almost like a course. So, and anybody who's a patron at that tier will get first dibs at seeing them before they are taken out and made into an official course that'll be more in depth. Okay, so thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye.